Hey everyone, welcome to the Good Doctor's continuing coverage of our Manufactured Immigrant Awareness Month, where we're talking about a whole lot of different reasons why people migrate or move from their country of origin or town of origin or home of origin. And today's topic is a particularly common yet complicated one, and that would be the issue of forced migration, which either ends up as a story of intranational or international refugee status in a lot of ways. And today's is a movie that was directed by Angelina Jolie called First They Killed My Father. A Cambodian girl, a daughter of Cambodia, remembers. Which is an interesting film from a cinematic dramaturgical standpoint. Some very specific choices that Angelina made as a director that Dr. Hinson and Dr. Erin and I have differing opinions on the effectiveness of. But ostensibly, it is a story about the process of the Khmer Rouge dictatorship taking over the country of Cambodia. It is told entirely through the eyes of a 5-year-old girl, which is a strength in that it is very visceral, and a weakness in that we get very little context of what is happening. If you have no exposure to the Khmer Rouge, this is not a story I would necessarily recommend you jump into, to be completely honest.
Not without maybe reading Wikipedia first or finding a couple of articles, which I knew that I didn't know a lot about it. But I decided to wait to read until after. But I definitely needed more context. So if this is all, if you don't know anything, read something first or find something else to watch that might help you.
Which there's a documentary called The Killing Fields that I would personally recommend before watching this one, that explains and goes through quite a lot more of the mechanisms of how the Khmer Rouge took over, how long they were in power for, the methods through which they maintained power. They were, they're probably still around, if we're honest, not as a regime, but as an ideology. They're communist ideology. They're a communist dictatorship. They were run, their leader was Pol Pot. And in this movie, they use the word Angkar, which we were unclear. Even in the, I had difficulty finding on Google exactly what that refers to, but it appeared, my guess is it is some sort of word title for Pol Pot within the Khmer Rouge regime. So real quick overview of the Khmer Rouge. They're terrible. So just heads up.
Just heads up there.
Really, really terrible. The United States was, hate to burst your bubble, not great in Southeast Asia. And one of the things that the United States government under President Nixon promised that was not happening during the Vietnam War was that we were not bombing Cambodia, and we were not, that Cambodia as a neutral country was kind of granted immunity from violence. And that is not true. The United States was, whether by accident or they needed it as a back door to get into Vietnam. There's, different opinions and different things. The United States was actively attacking Cambodia, whether they intentionally meant to or not. And this created an incredible amount of instability within Cambodia, as you can imagine. The United States then backed the Cambodian government as the one true leader of Cambodia. And then therefore the Cambodian government became the symbol of everything that was wrong in Cambodia, because it was the West. And it was the West is who backed Vietnam, and why Vietnam was bothering Cambodia. And it became a very easy narrative to sell. We walked right into it, to be completely honest. And
especially with the influence of the communist regime in China, literally physically so close.
And paying quite a lot of money.
A lot of money,
supplying weapons to the Khmer Rouge.
Yeah.
They grew, their popularity grew fairly steadily from what I have read during the Vietnam War. Essentially, the minute the United States pulled out of Vietnam, the day Saigon fell and the United States pulled out, it was like, accounts that I have read, is like a switch was flipped. That the Khmer Rouge then had all the power that they could need to march into Phnom Penh, which is the capital of Cambodia, remains the capital of Cambodia. And could very kind of quietly, which is very well shown in the movie in this way. They didn't come in like
guns
the
ablazing.
French Revolution, shooting everybody immediately. They said the Americans are going to bomb the city. You have 3 days you need to be out for 3 days, and then we'll let you back in. So it was very like, you could tell that this little girl's family knew that wasn't true, that isn't what was happening, because her father was a government official, and that they knew they were about to run for their lives for the rest of forever. But I doubt a lot of other Cambodians may have picked up on that, the way that the accounts are written. I've read firsthand accounts that people absolutely thought they were going to be let back into their homes after 3 days, that the Khmer Rouge were saving them from the evil Americans, and were going to be great. Spoiler, not interested in saving them from anything except crafting a communist regime that was, I mean, like, there's times I look at it and I'm like, man, Stalin would have called that extreme. So it's
well, it was mixed with like but kind of before we had the term, like an ethnic cleansing,
correct,
communism as well. And so there was only one ethnic group that was correct. And so they purged a lot of ethnically Chinese, ethnically Thai, Cambodians. Before you get more into that, I asked the internets and found Wikipedia's description of Angkar, which, sometimes
I was trying to stay away from Wikipedia when I Googled, but maybe it's our only option.
So. I know. According to Wikipedia, for roughly 2 years after the CPK, the Communist Party of Kampuchea, I don't know how to pronounce that, took power. So for 2 years after it took power, it referred to itself as the Angkar.
Okay.
Meaning the organization.
Got it. Okay.
However,
I kept trying to make it Pol Pot in my mind.
Yeah. So, however, okay. Pol Pot publicly declared on the 29th of September 1977 the existence of the CPK in a 5-hour-long speech. He revealed the true character of the supreme authority in Cambodia, an obscure ruling body that had been kept in seclusion.
Fascinating.
So the Angkar was just, that's how they referred to the CPK before they officially announced that the party was like ruling. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So
we're learning as we go here, folks. This is why we do these things.
So you see through the movie a very happy childhood completely destroyed. Through, in a way, it was completely blown up, and yet it wasn't. It was this slow chipping of everything she found safe. And this slow chipping, which is why this is my problem with the film, in that we didn't know what was happening. And that there is the first hour, this is where we differ, but the first hour I was really, really into the narrative, the idea that we had no idea what was going on because she was our lens. But then things started to get a little bit more complicated, and things started happening where some international factual context would have very helped me stay invested in the story. And instead I just felt a lot of confusion. And because I am a very unique individual that enjoys studying genocide and ethnic cleansing and trying to get to the bottom of why they happen. It is a professional and personal curiosity of mine. I was telling Dr. Erin offline that I'm probably one of like 4 humans on the planet that went to the Genocide Museum in Rwanda and did not cry. I have been informed that is an atypical clinical response to violence. My response to violence is always anger and curiosity of how do we make sure it never happens again. It's always a pragmatic response. For some reason, I skip the emotional response when it comes to trauma that happens to others and not myself. I don't know why. But it is one of the reasons that we work really well as a partnership, because that is not something that Dr. Erin experiences.
I do not bypass the emotions at all.
And so I knew, even as I was watching, that this was going to be a very affecting work for her, as while it bored me to tears in the last hour, because my curiosity was not getting sated. It was not telling me enough of what was happening. I had already established in my soul that this girl was miserable and forced to be a child soldier and was going to be damaged for the rest of her life, as she was constantly told. I mean, like, I wrote down all sorts of things like, Angkar is your family. Why are you so weak? We don't have affection here. Like, it was terrible. It was terrible. To me, we had established that. And I needed some other.
You needed to get on to the how does this end? How do we fix this?
I wanted it because I know it did. Like, while the Khmer Rouge controlled Cambodia for a whole lot longer than most of us remember, and had some very interesting relationships with the United Nations, it is no longer in power in Cambodia. Also, I wanted to know some of the connections to, because there was a lot of refugees from Cambodia that left and came to lots of countries, Australia and the United States, that escaped this regime. There was a lot more pieces of the Cambodian experience than this particular narrative. And I respect that my wanting of a broader is not what Angelina Jolie was interested in offering. But I do personally think the film is poorer for it, which I know you are not as strong on. So now that we've covered that, talk to me.
Yeah. So for those of you that don't know, I am a highly emotionally empathetic person. Dr. Kristen is also a highly empathetic person, but not necessarily with the emotions and the crying. I inherited this from my mother. My father used to tell her that she would cry at grocery store openings. So we cry very easily. I empathize with other people through emotional experiences. If somebody is crying on television, even if it's fiction, I start crying almost every single time. So, and I don't have nearly the experience that Dr. Kristen has with studying and experiencing sites of genocide. I have not been to concentration camps in Germany. I have not been to the Rwandan Genocide Museum. So I think all of those things are really important context for understanding her perspective as well. She's seen this a lot.
That's true. I've seen it a lot.
So I know I was watching it, in the before times when we used to watch these things together. Now we watch them separately and think about what the other person was thinking about while we were watching it. But I was
watching it at one point. I was like, Erin's going to sob. Erin is going to sob hysterically at this. I am so bored, and Erin's going to sob.
And I was watching it thinking, I'm sure Kristen is like, yep, I've seen this. I've seen people getting blown up by landmines before. I will say one of the things that I appreciated about this film throughout was how honest it was.
Yeah, that's very true. It was.
It did not shy from anything. And as you were talking, I'm kind of thinking about what we know about Angelina Jolie as a person. And I think in order to, you have to think about that maybe before you go into this movie, for those of you that might be thinking about watching it after watching our discussion. Because she, throughout her career as a public servant, has been almost entirely focused on children and protecting children and refugee children. I believe two of the children her and Brad Pitt adopted are Cambodian. But I mean, that's what she was UN ambassador, I think, for a long time, if she still isn't. And so I understand that that's, for her, the most important story you could tell out of this was what a child goes through in a war-torn country as a refugee, as a child soldier, as all the experiencing of the trauma. I do feel like the movie was a little bit too long. But I, as we discussed, I didn't have the same emotional reaction as Dr. Kristen. For me, there's so much importance in the little things that it's a slowly paced movie, which I normally don't like. But I was thinking about, they very slowly show you the ways that she kind of understands what's happening. So she starts, and it can be hard to follow sometimes, but there's a scene where she's learning how to use a gun, and the first time she uses it and she shoots like a coconut and the birds fly away from the shot, she gets a flashback to she didn't understand what was happening when she was forced to leave an area, when she heard a loud noise and the birds flew away, and now she understands that what she heard was people being shot. And it's very dense.
Visceral.
Yeah, and it's very visceral, the whole movie. You are almost the entire time supposed to be experiencing this on her level, from the camera angles to the confusion. I think the point of it was for us to not know what was happening, because she didn't know who the Vietnamese were. So we're not supposed to know who the Vietnamese. And
Yeah, and like I said, I liked that conceit for about an hour and 20 minutes.
No, I know.
And then that last 40 was oofta.
Yeah, and the last 40 readers, without giving too many spoilers away, was the 40 minutes of the film that I was entirely sobbing. So I found it very emotional to watch her go through this. Parts of the movie I actually felt physically sick during. But it does for me, I was thinking a lot about my research into personal mechanisms of resistance and coercion and control. And I wrote down at one point, I was like, they're turning the whole country into a panopticon, which is like this surveillance state where you're all supposed to watch each other and like tell on each other when they're not following the rules of this.
It's like a real life Gilead. Like
it is,
which is the fictional story from Handmaid's Tale. And this was very much in the news as Margaret Atwood would have been writing Handmaid's Tale. And so I do very much, like, there was a couple times where I was like, oh, Commander so-and-so could have said that. And so it was very
so we have fictional parallels to draw from this. So there, for me, there's so much value in a movie that does that so empathetically. And like, there were real small moments, like towards the end of the film, she's in a refugee camp with her siblings, and the words, I love the way that she always overheard adults talking about things.
Yeah, that touch was brilliant.
Anytime we ever got context was when she was overhearing adults talking about things, which was genius. But she overhears the adults say that they've caught a soldier from the Khmer Rouge, and like watching that little child actress go through like anger, and like she clenches her fist and she's remembering her training, that she is like, I thought she was going to kill him. I thought she was going to pick up that knife that woman threw down, and I thought she was going to slit his throat. And like the little moments of that for me were very, very impactful. But I do think, like we talked about this offline, you should either do research beforehand or know going in that you're going to be confused and like be okay with sitting with that emotion and do research after, or like watch it in conjunction with a film like The Killing Fields, which was based on a reporter, a Cambodian person who escaped the Khmer Rouge and started reporting on it and coined the term The Killing Fields to talk about it. Because it was a mass genocide of people. I mean, they do say at the end of the movie that 25% of the Cambodian population was killed either through forced migration, famine, starvation, or actual killing of people. So, I mean, that was a staggering number for me, from estimates that we have 1.7 to 2.5 million people in 4 years. Which, if you are, familiar with genocides, they work very quickly.
They do. Yeah. Rwanda was between 750,000 and 1 million in like 4 months.
Like 4 or 5 months, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, in terms of Immigrant Awareness Month, just drawing out some larger context here, I mean, I think such a huge part of the immigrant story is being forced to leave your home for good or ill. A lot of the romantic stories we tell are about especially people emigrating to the United States, are about, leaving for better opportunities, better life.
But we never unpack what was bad about the other one enough to de-romanticize it. Like we've talked about this a lot, is there's a song in the musical Anastasia where Anastasia and the two con men that are traveling with her are leaving Russia on a cart full of people that are all never going to see Russia again.
Yeah.
Never going to see Russia again. And the song they sing, For My Money, is the most emotionally effective song of the entire musical.
It is.
And it is, my husband and I have talked about this a lot. He left his country to move with me, and sure, he can go back in times that are not COVID soaked, but he took up his citizenship here. Yeah. And this is a home now. And when he goes back to visit, it's never home again in the same way. And it's this very complicated thing. And my husband's life in Ireland was fine. Like, it was fine. He left to be with me so we could be together. But we've sat in rooms and he's sat in interview waiting rooms with people who were leaving child marriage and were leaving forced migration and were leaving starvation and family abuse situations and all sorts of things. The United States offers asylum very clearly to people who come from situations like the Khmer Rouge and places in Mexico where there is absolutely no way to have a safe or healthy life according to the government system. It's one of the many things that our founding fathers set up that was good, is a system of asylum, because this has been the human story forever, that people have treated people terribly forever, and people have had to flee forever. And there was definitely an influx of Cambodian refugees in the United States during and after the Khmer Rouge. I know a couple of them personally. There's a huge community in Texas, for instance. And it's just all very... Immigrant Awareness Month is incredibly important, as we've talked about, to remember that it's not all immigrants from Mexico and it's not all immigrants from Ireland, which is often the narrative that the United States tells, that there is the romantic European immigrants and then there is the other immigrants. And it's simply not the case a lot of times. And there are definitely people that choose to leave their homeland entirely by choice. And they do it for marriage, they do it for a job or things like that. It's still a complicated emotion, but it is not this.
Yeah.
It's not this. And to pretend otherwise cheapens this.
Yeah. And I think the thing that the film does really brilliantly too is to show the instability of it.
Yeah.
Because I've never been a political refugee from a violent regime. So I cannot empathize with those experiences. And so you don't know how tenuous it is, and you don't know how scary it is, and you don't know how radically it can change. And so it's just the most important thing to learn about what these humans go through, and what they have to go through in order to survive. Never mind then the process of leaving your country, leaving your language, leaving your culture and your religion and going somewhere else. So it's, obviously we talked about why we were doing this is a huge empathy builder. But also, we love to complicate narratives. And so it's harder to get much more complicated than forced migration and refugees. And so, I'm deeply grateful that we picked this film, even if I was severely emotionally traumatized by it. I think that was the point. And I think next week we're talking about Syrian refugees. So
it just keeps getting fun.
We're going to end with it. So we're like documentary film. So next week is a documentary about Syrian refugee children. And then we're going to end on a film about Indian immigrants in the United States, Indian subcontinent. So I don't know if it's going to be happier, but
it's a lot more complicated I've seen The Namesake, and it's a lot more about family and identity than it is about machetes.
The actual moving of humans. Yeah. So immigration and migration is a massive thing that we, for a lot of reasons, oversimplify. So as always, we're here to stir that pot. It's
obviously a topic that we feel very personally about. We've been temporary immigrants in other countries, and I'm now married to a permanent alien, which is what he is called. He is a naturalized alien, but he will always be an alien
now. Yeah.
And so that is something that we hold very, very real in our lived experiences, and we like to share those as we complicate those narratives. But we have admittedly zero experience with Syrian refugees. That's not been part of our lived experience at all. We don't know anyone who is one. And so we are very much looking forward to spending some time in this narrative and then sharing our thoughts with you. And we will see you then.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.